If you're currently babysitting a couple of aging Dell or HP boxes running Hyper-V, you know the struggle. The hardware is getting loud, the warranties are expiring, and the idea of moving everything to the cloud feels like a trap. You don't want to learn 200 different AWS acronyms. You don't want a 6-month digital transformation workshop. You just want your 10 servers to run somewhere else safely for a price that doesn't fluctuate based on the phase of the moon. So who are the players in the UK market? Let's break them down fast. First, you have the enterprise giants Node 4 and Exponential E. These guys are built for massive organizations. They talk about SD-WAN, G-Cloud frameworks, and ISO certifications. If you have a procurement department and enjoy 3-course lunches with sales reps before getting a price quote, they are great. But if you just want a VDC price today, good luck finding it on their website. Then there is virtualDCS. They are strong on disaster recovery and backups, and they don't charge for data transfer, which is nice. But again, it's a quote-only shop. Unless you want to get on the phone to discuss hybrid synergies, you hit a wall. Then there's Katapult. This is Crystal's cloud. Great tech, nice people, but it's built for developers, not sysadmins. You buy fixed-size rocks, rigid blocks of CPU and RAM. It feels more like DigitalOcean than a virtual server room. If your database needs more RAM but not more CPU, tough, you have to upgrade the whole block. And that brings us to Farbyte. We built the Farbyte Virtual Data Center for the UK SME sysadmin. We don't sell you rigid blocks, we sell you a resource pool. You get a big chunk of EPYC Gen 4 CPU, DDR5 RAM, and enterprise NVMe storage, and you decide how to slice it up. Want a tiny web server and a massive database server? Go for it. We include the private VLAN so your backend isn't naked on the internet. We give you transparent, fixed pricing right on the site. And most importantly, when you call for help, you get a UK engineer who knows what Hyper-V and VMware is and helps you migrate, not a call center script reader. So if you want to retire that noisy server rack without hiring a consultant, Farbyte is the home you've been looking for. Now, let's take a closer look at each of the cloud providers. We'll start with a feature and price transparency comparison. To compare these for an SME use case, let's use a simple reference point. I need a few VMs equivalent to a 4 vCPU, 16 GB RAM, 100 GB SSD server on a private network in a UK data center. The results? Well, they were pretty polarizing. Let's start with the closed shop. We looked at Node 4, virtualDCS, and Exponential E. If you go to their sites looking for a price tag, you won't find one. All three are strictly quote-only. You have to talk to a salesperson just to get a baseline number. In 2026, that lack of transparency is a real friction point for businesses that just want to run the numbers. Now, let's look at the two who actually publish their prices, Katapult and Farbyte. First, Katapult. To their credit, they have a full pricing matrix for that 4-core spec. They charge from £73 to £130 per month, including VAT. That seems cheap on paper. However, you have to look at what you're buying. That is a fixed-size VM, meaning you can't easily resize just the RAM or just the CPU. More importantly, that price is for older hardware, specifically low to medium-frequency EPYC Gen 2 and Gen 3 processors. Then there is Farbyte VDC. We also publish our pricing because we believe in transparency. For a similar setup, the cost is around £87 per month. Now, why the difference? Two massive reasons. 1. Performance. Farbyte runs on high-frequency Gen 4 chips. These are 50 to 70% faster than the Gen 3 chips the competition is using. You are paying a little more on the base price compared to Katapult, but you are getting nearly double the processing power. 2. Flexibility. Unlike Katapult's fixed VMs, the Farbyte model is a flexible resource pool. You aren't locked into a rigid cookie-cutter shape. Plus, that price includes migration support to actually help you get your infrastructure moved over. So, the takeaway? You can choose the call for quote crowd, the budget option with older hardware and rigid limits, or you can go with Farbyte for transparent pricing on modern, high-speed infrastructure. Moving on to the backbone of any secure infrastructure, private networking. This is usually where providers hide hidden costs or complicate things with vague terminology. First, you have the enterprise players, Node 4, virtualDCS, and Exponential E. They use a lot of high-level language here. VirtualDCS talks about zero-trust logic, and Exponential E mentions being integrated behind your firewall. While that sounds secure, it's often code for complex managed setups where you might not have direct visibility into the nuts and bolts without a consultation. Then there's Katapult. They offer private networking with free internal transfer. That's a good standard baseline. It keeps your costs down, but the description stops there. This brings us to Farbyte VDC, where we get specific about isolation. Farbyte doesn't just give you a private network. You get a dedicated gigabit VLAN per tenant. That means your internal traffic isn't just logically separated, it's on its own broadcast domain. It's unmetered, so you can move terabytes of backups between your DB and app servers without watching the meter. But the real kicker here is the security layer. Farbyte provides a per VM firewall. Most providers just put a firewall at the edge at the gateway. If a hacker gets past the gate, they can jump from server to server. With Farbyte's per VM setup, even inside your private VLAN, you can lock down traffic between your own nodes. Now let's take a look at public bandwidth. This is usually where the bill shock happens at the end of the month. When we looked at the field, we found 3 distinct approaches. First, you have the Trust Us model. Node 4 claims free internet bandwidth, and Exponential E talks about a predictable OpEx model. But again, because they are quote only, you don't actually know the speed limits or the fair usage policies until you're reading a contract. It's vague by design. Then there is the metered model. Katapult gives you free inbound traffic, which is great for ingest, but your outbound traffic is pooled per VM. If you exceed that pool, you are paying 2 pence per gigabyte. That sounds small, but if you have a busy month and go a terabyte over, that's an extra 20 quid instantly added to your bill. It requires constant monitoring. There is one outlier, virtualDCS. They offer no ingress or egress charges. That is a strong offer financially, provided the port speeds and enterprise pricing meet your needs. And that brings us to Farbyte. We take a balanced approach that prioritizes speed. We give every tenant a 1 gigabit public uplink per VM. That is a massive pipe. Many providers who offer unlimited data cap your speed at 100 megabits. We don't. We give you a massive 1 gig connection so your site loads instantly and your downloads fly. We bundle a generous amount of transfer with that speed, enough that most standard business users never even think about it. And if you're running a media-heavy application, we can simply add more to your pool. It's high-speed burstability without the anxiety of a ticking meter. Now, let's talk about the thing that keeps sysadmins awake at night, storage and data safety. You see a lot of generic enterprise terminology from the big players. Node 4, virtualDCS, and Exponential E all list enterprise flash or high-performance SSDs in Tier 3 data centers. That sounds reassuring, but it's vague. They promise 99.99% availability, but they don't explicitly tell you how that data is replicated without you digging into the fine print. Then you have Katapult and Farbyte. We are both very specific about the architecture. We both use triple copy NVMe storage. This is the modern gold standard. Every piece of data you write isn't just saved once, it is written to 3 separate physical disks across different nodes simultaneously. If a drive fails, you don't notice. If an entire server node dies, the cluster just keeps running. So mechanically, Katapult and Farbyte are neck and neck here. But there is one massive difference in the Farbyte offering. Farbyte includes a weekly disaster recovery backup. Here is why that matters. High availability protects you from hardware failure. But if you accidentally delete a critical database table, HA just replicates that deletion to all 3 copies instantly. Most providers, including the ones on this list, charge you extra for any form of off-site backup. Farbyte includes that weekly safety net in the price. We treat disaster recovery as a standard feature, not an upsell. Finally, let's talk about the most undervalued feature until things go wrong: support. We looked at the support models across the board, and there are 3 distinct vibes here. First, you have the enterprise machinery. Node 4 and Exponential E offer fully managed services. They talk about workshops and 24/7 managed layers. That sounds comprehensive, but in practice, it often means bureaucracy. You aren't just calling for help, you're entering a process. You're submitting a request to a department that might schedule a consultation. It's heavy. Then you have the ticket-first approach. Katapult describes their support as ticket-led and developer-centric. This is efficient if you prefer asynchronous communication. You log a bug, you wait for a reply. It's functional, but it can feel distant when you're under pressure. VirtualDCS gets closer to the mark with UK engineer support, though they tend to wrap a lot of their hands-on help into paid add-ons. And then there is Farbyte. Our model is very simple, UK sysadmin-led. What does that mean? It means when you reach out, you aren't talking to a customer service agent reading a script who asks you to reboot 3 times. You're getting direct engineer access. You're talking to someone who builds these clusters, someone who knows Linux, knows the network stack, and knows exactly what you're trying to achieve. There is no escalation path because you start at the top tier. If you're a techie, you know the relief of speaking to someone who speaks your language immediately. That is the Farbyte difference. So let's wrap this up. We've looked at pricing, performance, networking, and support. The big question is, when is Farbyte actually the right choice for you? Let's be honest, we aren't trying to be AWS and we aren't trying to be a massive, faceless enterprise carrier. Farbyte is built for a specific kind of setup. Farbyte is the answer if you're currently running between 2 and 20 virtual servers, maybe on-premise or with a legacy provider, and you want them somewhere safe without having to re-architect your entire business. You care about fixed monthly bills. You don't want pay-per-second surprises. You want to know exactly what the invoice will be. You want security that makes sense, a private VLAN and per VM firewalls, not a maze of complex gateways and security groups. And finally, you want to speak to UK engineers who solve problems, not navigate a corporate help desk menu. If that sounds like your situation, you don't need a 6-figure digital transformation project just to retire your server room. You just need a virtual data center that works like the hardware you already understand, only quieter, cooler, and frankly, someone else's problem when a disk dies.